When I married my husband, Mark, I knew that becoming a stepmother wasn't going to be a simple journey. He had a son, David, who was just 15 at the time. I still remember the first time I met him. Tall for his age, quiet, and carrying a certain heaviness in his eyes that I couldn't quite place. It was the kind of weight you often see in children who have gone through divorce. David's mom and Mark had separated when David was only 8. While Mark had done everything he could to be present, the truth was that David had grown up between two households, never fully settled in either. When I entered the picture, I promised myself I would never try to replace his mother, but I wanted to be someone he could rely on, a friend, a listener, a safe presence. Over the years, I watched David grow from a withdrawn teenager into a young man. He had his quirks. He loved tinkering with old radios, writing in spiral notebooks, and listening to music that seemed to belong to another decade. Mark and I often joked that David had an old soul. Still, he kept much of himself guarded, sharing pieces of his world only in brief moments when he forgot to put his walls up. By the time David turned 21, he had grown into a tall, thoughtful young man with sharp blue eyes and a gentle nature. He was polite, careful with his words, and always respectful, but he still carried that air of distance. He lived with us while going to college nearby, and though he spent hours in his room, I never minded. I figured that was just the way young men were, quiet, independent, protective of their space. But one evening, I stumbled into a moment that would change how I saw him forever. It was late past 11. Mark had gone to bed early because of work the next morning, and I stayed up folding laundry in the living room. As I carried a stack of towels upstairs, I noticed David's bedroom door was slightly open. The soft glow of a lamp spilled into the hallway. Normally, I would have passed by without a thought, but something made me pause. I heard faint music playing inside, an acoustic guitar, slow and haunting. Curiosity got the better of me. I gently pushed the door a little wider, and that's when I caught him, in what I can only describe as a deeply private moment. David was sitting on the floor with his guitar in his lap, his head bowed over the strings. In front of him lay a worn notebook, its pages filled with scribbles and lyrics. He was singing softly, almost whispering, as if the words were too fragile to be released into the world. It wasn't just music, it was emotion poured out raw and unguarded. His voice cracked once or twice, but that only made it more real. I realized I was witnessing a side of David he had never shown anyone. This wasn't the polite, reserved young man who moved through the house quietly. This was David stripped bare, sharing his soul with the four walls of his room. For a moment, I stood frozen, unsure if I should back away or let him know I was there. But then, the floor creaked under my weight, and David's head shot up. His eyes widened in shock, and he quickly set the guitar aside as if he'd been caught doing something wrong. "Stepmom? What are you doing?" he asked, his voice tense. I immediately raised my hands in apology. "I'm so sorry, David. I wasn't trying to pry. I was just walking by, and I heard your music." His face flushed crimson, and he ran a hand through his hair nervously. "It's nothing. Just something I do to pass the time." But I knew it wasn't nothing. What I heard in his voice carried too much pain, too much beauty, too much truth. I gave him a soft smile. "David, it's not nothing. It's amazing. You have real talent." He shook his head quickly. "No. You don't understand. It's not good. It's just me trying to deal with stuff." That was the moment I realized what I had walked into wasn't just music practice. It was his way of processing the world, of healing wounds no one else could see. I stepped further into the room, gently setting the towels on his bed. "David," I said quietly, "you don't ever have to hide that part of yourself. What you are doing, it's beautiful. It's honest. And it takes courage to put your feelings into words like that." He stared at me for a long time, as if trying to decide whether he could believe me. Finally, his shoulders relaxed, and his eyes softened. "You really think so?" "I don't just think so," I said. "I know so." That night became a turning point in our relationship. For the first time, David let me into his inner world. He showed me pages of lyrics he had written, Poems about loneliness, about the divorce, about feeling caught between two families. Some were angry, some were heartbreakingly sad, and others were surprisingly hopeful. As he read them out loud, his voice shook, but I listened with all the care I had. When he finished, I looked at him with tears in my eyes. David, you have a gift. Don't ever doubt that. For the first time in years, I saw a small, genuine smile spread across his face. It was the kind of smile that told me he felt seen. From that night forward, our bond grew in ways I hadn't expected. He began sharing his songs with me, sometimes late at night when Mark was asleep. I would sit on the floor beside him, listening as he poured his heart into music. He admitted he had dreams of performing one day, but never thought he was good enough. I told him he was more than good enough. I told him he was brave.